Thank you. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee meeting of Tuesday, the 7th of March, 2023. We will start with apologies.
Received apologies from Councillor Sarah Bittercoper and Councillor Saul Penfold.
Thank you very much. We don't have any substitutes. Any public questions?
None received.
Any declarations of interest you will find in your pack between pages 1 to 6. If anybody has anything, I'm seeing nods, so we'll move on with that one. Thank you very much. Any urgent business?
None received.
None received. Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, item number 6 on your agenda. I'm not proposing to read through. We'll look at page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. I see no hand, no questions. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer, Councillor Cushing, seconder, Peter Fisher. Thank you very much. We move on. Item number 7, the strategic audit plan. That's over to you, Faye, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the internal audit plan of work from April onwards for the year 23-24. In pulling this suggested programme of work together, we have met with all senior management team members and carried out a risk assessment involving a full review of the strategic risk register. We also have a strategic plan covering 4 years, and then we provide you with a bit more detail in the annual internal audit plan of those reviews we plan to carry out for the year ahead, and give an indication of days in the quarter in which we'll undertake that work. The first half of the report, however, is quite lengthy and wordy, and it's our formal documents around the way that we will deliver the service. So this isn't too different from the charter and strategy that you've received and approved in previous years. So I don't really feel that you would need to pay too much attention to that unless you had any specific questions. I would really urge the committee to have a look over the annual internal audit plan and provide any feedback if they feel anything is missing or had any particular questions around areas that we're covering. And new to this year, in section 6 of the report on page 21, we outline our assurance mapping exercise. The external quality assessment from the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors recommended that we consider other assurances available for the top scoring risks at the council, to enable us to not duplicate our efforts. If there are any independent forms of assurance available, we should be relying on those to pull the opinion together. So at appendix 6, I believe it is, 5 of the report, you'll see those top 2 scoring risks and the types of management information and assurance that I believe is available, and then our internal audit approach in the far right hand column. So I'm happy to take your queries on the plan of work for the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody, any questions or confirmation of anything they want clarified? Christopher, please.
Thanks for that. The question is, in terms of the work that you're doing, has it sort of looked at the existing risks, and does it focus particular attention on any areas where we've had sort of substantive concerns in the past?
Thank you. Yes, it does. So what we'll do as part of the planning approach, in appendix 3, we've got an audit universe, as it were, of the key areas throughout the council that we ordinarily provide audit assurance on. And within the last review and assurance column, we do make a consideration about whether we've given a limited in that area before and whether actually we need to revisit it. And we also look at the work carried out this year. Sometimes we may need to revisit it in a bit more of a fuller fashion to provide assurance that things are moving forward. So that has been a consideration, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. We are asked to consider and approve items A, B, and C, I believe. And a D, and a D, yeah. Can we do those on block? Yeah, okay. So a proposer and a seconder, please. Proposer Peter Fisher, seconder Christopher, and a show of hands, please, gentlemen. Thank you. And I can say gentlemen quite easily. Thank you. Okay. Item number 8, the GRAC annual self-assessment. Again, this is something we see every year, which we go through. I took copies of this beforehand, so we've gone through that. Faye, you got anything you want to add on this one?
Yeah, just to, if you wish to signpost any areas for after May onwards, potentially for new members of the committee, depending on how the situation plays out. But I think in most areas you have quite rightly highlighted that this is an effective committee discharging its terms of reference. So my ask would just be that you reflect on what was provided last year in terms of answers, and if anything needs to change, just let me know and I'll update that for the following year.
Thank you. I notice we don't have any assessment below 4. That's quite good. Your previous one on page 48, you've also highlighted item 15. The membership of the committee has been assessed against the core knowledge. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the training again will be implemented for the new season. So, but I think that's an important factor that we have to admit that we can't always be all fully trained up all the time. We need to do. So has anybody got any comments apart from there's nothing less than 4, which is good going. I think last year was similar.
Yeah, so this is the appendix 1 to this
Yeah.
report is last year's results. We may wish to consider an action point about taking forward the independent discussion post May as well. And exactly as you say, building a training programme around skills and needs of the committee will be key. The assessment next year will look slightly different because there's a new template and it's a bit more interactive, similar questions, so it's not going to be too dissimilar. But I think, yeah, those 2 points, training and experience and independent, for discussion next time.
Thank you. So I believe we are asked to. Here we go. So the recommendation is that the committee discuss, which we have, the attached checklist and appendix 1 to this report from 2022. Consider whether any of the scoring requires amending, which I think we've agreed it doesn't, or whether any improvement actions needed to be developed in any area. Is everyone content with that? Okay, we don't need a show on that, do we? No, fine, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on then. Item number 9 is the draft annual statement of accounts. That's for Tina, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. We haven't got a draft annual statement of accounts to present to the committee this afternoon. They're still being finalised, and we haven't yet quite finalised the 2021, although I gave my assurance prior to Christmas that we would have that completed by the end of the calendar year. It all really boils down to the fact that we've still got some staff shortages, and there's been other priorities that have had to come first in terms of, for example, setting a balanced budget. We had a gap with our budget, and so I had to divert my priority. You know, that was my priority, was to get that done. I had to divert my attention to that before Christmas. I mean, this, I think, demonstrates the risk of not having a fully resourced finance section. And I've been doing some work on that in terms of reviewing job descriptions. So I'm hoping that within the next few months, we will be able to recruit some more team members and get caught up on this, along with, we've got a new finance system that we've got implemented as well. We need to do some work on that. We just need to bring the staff in to fully resource the section so that we can actually present these things in a timely manner. In terms of the actual finalisation of the 21-22, I think it will be later on this spring, and then we can bring that before the GRAC committee, which will probably be the next one in June. So I would see that that will be presented in June.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any questions for Tina on this? Pierre, please.
It is rather unusual in that I think prior to COVID, which is probably before then, most councils were able to complete their accounts within the given deadline of the 31st of May and go through the process of getting the accounts audited, signed off within the given timeframes. Because most councils did it, we didn't know what the implications were, but there's been so many councils now that haven't, and we don't seem to be subject to any rap on the knuckles, or no one has been reprimanded by central government, or I think there's a list published of who has and who hasn't, but I don't think there are any implications as such. Oh no, not by a long way. No, there's several councils that are several years behind. We're not the worst placed council by any stretch.
You want?
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with what Section 151 officers advised, but I would also say that nationally, it's not just the pressure on council or local authority finance teams. The external audit function is significantly stretched and has been subject of reporting in many of the local government press, both the LGC and the Municipal Journal, in terms of recruitment and retention and the management of workload. So I think it's a combination of both our internal capacity and external pressures and context.
You okay with that? Christopher, please.
Well, mine is a variation on the theme, actually. So I was to ask actually what's the impact of it. So if there isn't one, I following on for that, I'd like to ask is what plans do you have in order to recruit up to the numbers you actually need? Because I do have a perception of late, not just for this committee, but others, that papers are coming through late. Clearly, we have a statutory duty within whatever committee we're in order to have that information in good time. So is there an action plan in place by a specific date in order to recruit people so that we can perhaps get back on track?
I'm happy to take that, Chair, if you wish. So obviously members will be aware that we haven't had a full-time Director of Resources and Section 151 officer within the authority for the period from the end of May through until Tina's appointment in November. The statutory responsibilities were met by a mutual aid arrangement supported by Breckland Council. We also, during that same period of time, had long-term sickness absence of the Chief Technical Accountant, who subsequently left the authority's employment. So that's created some pressure in terms of leadership and capacity within the finance team. So I've obviously discussed that with Tina since her appointment. Her priority had to be the setting of a budget for 23-24, and that's where the early focus of the team has been, alongside what was a programmed implementation of a new finance system. But obviously with the recent approval of the budget, Tina is now turning her thoughts to what is a fit structure, properly resourced, and we will be moving forward with the recruitment and advertisement of those posts shortly. That's within the budget that you've approved, in that we've obviously been carrying vacancies within that service, and now we're able to give our consideration to closing that gap.
I may come to, so does that mean by June, when this committee meets again, that we will be in a better position? Is that within the timescales you know?
Yeah, I'm currently, and I've literally been doing it this week, looking at the job descriptions for the vacancies that we've got, and also one of the other job descriptions which needs a bit of tweaking. I need to get those through JE panel, and then I can advertise them. So subject to us getting suitable candidates and the notice period, I do envisage that we should have at least some of those filled by June, but definitely during the summer if we have suitable candidates come forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other points? Anyone wants clarification or anything to raise? Okay, we are asked to, the committee note the content of the report and approve that the statement of accounts for the 21-22 are brought back to the next governance, risk and audit committee, which will be in June 2023. We all content with that. You need a vote on that? Okay, can I propose on that one, please? Pierre, seconder for Christopher, and a show of hands, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 10 is the North Walsham High Street Heritage Zone. Going to hand this one over to Erica. Welcome.
Thank you.
We won't bite.
No.
I don't know. Well, people have got it. I'll leave it to you. They've got it. They've read it.
Yeah.
If there's anything, then I'll leave it up to you. Okay. Thank you.
So good afternoon. So this report has come as a request from December's open scrutiny meeting, where it was asked to review the project governance and management to see if it was online and complied with the council's framework. So I have carried out a review, and my findings are that it does comply with the council's framework. There is further detail in the reports that you have. Happy to, of course, take any questions.
Okay. Thank you for that. Christopher, please.
Well, I think I was one who raised the issue, particularly around the risk register, which if we go to page 65 of the report. Just the concern I have is when you just glance at it, there's very little information actually on there. I mean, a risk is defined as something which may happen, which would have an adverse impact. Well, if you look at the report there in the description, you know, and in the top one, it states very minimalist word about what may happen, but there's no description of the impact in case it actually does. So it's from a project management purist point of view, that's not really as it should be. And then also you should have sort of a detailed description of what mitigation you would take or actions you can take in order to mitigate that risk. And 10 normally would have either be current or you would update it as you go along. So the risk registers I'm used to looking at would tend to have an awful lot of detail on them. This is very bare bones. So the concern I have is if you're not maintaining risk registers, I would expect you to be, then it worries. The concern is, well, then what else in the project management framework has not been done quite as it should be. And really, I think at this stage of the game, it's probably a mention for probably future deliveries. So I understand it has projects coming to its fulfillment, but it really is very minimalist. I mean, that wouldn't pass muster. I suspect where I came from is working in the private sector, a project manager. So.
Thank you. I think just from my point of view, I was, checking from a governance point of view that it was regularly updated and, discussed at every project board meeting and updated and sent to relevant people. But yeah, we'll take those forward. Future.
If I may come back, I mean, effectively, registration should be a passerby should be able to pick it up and read it and understand what the risk is and what the impact of that risk is. You look at it, and it may be to different parts of the project. You just can't glean that from what's written in here. So if you don't, if the people inputting it aren't putting the correct information in here, then that means they're probably not managing the risks as they should do, particularly if they're not looking at how they might mitigate those. I mean, there's an old project management adage, you manage your project through your risks. So, and if you couldn't manage a project through what's written down here, I would suggest. So it's sort of constructive feedback.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Yeah, no, thank you. Definitely take feedback on board. Like I say, I was just checking, you know, that that it was being regularly updated, but yeah, completely take that point on board. You know, Steve wants to say anything.
No, that's fine. Any, Peter, please?
Well, just to say that I walked through the scheme and it looks a fine piece of work from what I've seen. And it looks as though it's coming to a conclusion in the next couple of weeks, which I believe will probably finish earlier than we had been expecting.
Mhm.
So I think congratulations are due, considering the bad weather that we've had with freezing temperatures and what have you, that the work has actually got done.
Mm. My only sort of comment really is that you look through the risk register, that there are 34 risks that are listed, and 33% of them are red, which on a risk register is always the bit you look for, with the red bit, because that's the bit I want to read. Yes, all the rest are very nice and someone's doing their job properly. The red bits are the bits that you are concerned about. So, sorry, Steve, you want to?
So I think you would expect the left-hand coloured column to have lots of red and orange in terms of this format, and I'm comfortable that Councillor Cushing has said, do we need to review the approach in terms of the risk register? And the authority has used others which are more dynamic. Certainly the risk register that was deployed for the Bacton Walcott sandscaping scheme was arguably more dynamic in its approach, but that was a £19 million project with significant risks in terms of global financial issues, the purchase of significant energy fuel costs in advance. So the areas of red that you refer to, Chair, are largely the anticipated risk if a circumstance took place. The important column in terms of our corporate position and learning is the position on the right hand side of the table, because that's where we would believe the mitigation has taken place in a steady state if those mitigation factors were deployed. So I think the concern that I would have is if there remained red blocks on the right hand side, and the first one of those is a situation that in some parts have come to pass, and I think was the reason for the referral of the project as a whole for review under the governance framework, and that's insufficient funds available to improve buildings, barns and the site. So that's still at red, and I think that with contract inflation in the last 12 months, as against when the project was initially approved in 2021 by Historic England, that situation has definitely come to pass, and that's why that column remains red on the right hand side of the page. And then there's a second red area on the bottom of the page 67 in landscape form, which says around delays and restrictions, including material shortages, labour shortages and cost rises. We have sought to mitigate that by buying materials up front, and we were supported in that by Historic England. So we've tried to minimise that position. But in terms of labour contract cost inflation, that has been a reality, and that has applied to this project and many capital projects involving construction contracts by local authorities and national government as a whole. So I think those are the two areas of red which remain on the right hand side of the register. I would expect the position to improve from the left hand coloured column to the right hand coloured column, and in most instances that has been achieved in this project, but not all.
Yes, thank you for that, and I apologise. That I will slightly retract then from what I said originally. You're correct. It's just that reds always stick out at you, and therefore you read them, and that's the way.
That is the value of this committee, Chair, because it is around deepening that understanding collectively. So there is ownership of the challenges. If we want to take forward big capital projects as an authority and be ambitious in delivering against this corporate plan, the corporate plan that will be developed after the elections on May the 4th, the type of projects that you are involved in will carry an element of risk.
Yes.
And it's how those risks are then managed and mitigated that is the legitimate focus of this committee. And so, the questions and understanding of jointly of this is important as we move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you
Can I-
very much.
Sorry.
Christopher, yeah, please.
Oh, I just want to come back on that because I did raise this originally, but I would argue a risk register is a living document. You don't need historic RAG ratings on there because if you're confused about it, so just because that's the first thing actually when you look at it, your eyes are drawn to the middle of the page. I don't think you need any of those 3 historic columns on there. All you really need are the ones on the right hand side, which is the current position. Otherwise, document show it makes it easy to maintain, and it's more understandable for those who are looking at it.
I'm happy for us to review that position and seek the advice of FAE and other organisations in terms of local authority best practice. It's my understanding that the template used here is a common template that is used by many local authorities, but that isn't to say there isn't a different way of doing it, and I'm happy to take that away from this meeting.
Do you want to come in there? Yeah.
Just to say that we've got a risk management maturity assessment booked in for this year's programme. So I think it would be good for us to look at the strategic risk register, the project risk registers, and then just feed in a bit of advice based on that. And in terms of the risk management point, I totally take your point of view. If having a current score is fab, because you're just working from that. But from a management perspective, we like to see that the risk score is coming down. So we've got that original one to compare it against. But that can absolutely be part of the discussion that we have when we think about what the best approach is for the framework. Ideally, I would like to see a consistent register used across all of the different departmental projects and strategic, so that we can have a demonstration of escalation and de-escalation. But, again, lots of people do it in different ways, and we can have those discussions during the review.
Okay. No, it's a good point. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. I think anybody got any other further question? I think you've given it justice for what the Overview and Scrutiny Committee were asking us to look at, which I think is fully there in the report for them. We've reviewed the project governance of the North Walsham Heritage Action Zone scheme, and to consider the project's risk register as part of this review. Well, I can honestly say I think we have done that. And I don't think we need a show of hands or anything on that, do we? No. No, there's no recommendation or anything there. Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, the next one is item 11, our friend the reef, which I think again is down to you, Erica.
Hello again. Yes, so I don't have an awful lot to add to this really. This was the same report that was submitted to Overview and Scrutiny in January, and a recommendation from that was that in particular the lessons learned came to this meeting to kind of agree on any future actions from them.
Yes, thank you. Anybody want to start off on this? Any lessons learned that we've looked at the list of lessons learned? It's not extensive, I have to say. No red ones, of course. Yeah, there's bound to be with a project of that size. I suppose it's being the open and honest part of it, of admitting that, mistakes can be
The
made.
conversation is, that there was definitely some good points raised with an Overview and Scrutiny, but rather than just letting it sit there on paper, that, we pick some of these up going forward, maybe make some suggestions or actions going forward in different projects.
So regarding the lessons learnt part, I think they're all fairly clear what caused them, what the recommendation was. Is there any there that anyone feels is critical?
It's not right. Sorry, I don't.
Yeah.
The only question I had is how will these lessons be fed back to future projects which are starting? Where will they be stored? How will they be flagged?
What lessons learned in general? How will
No, the lessons learned from this project. So when you come back to when the future projects are initiated, how will we ensure that project managers in charge of that will take note of what's happened in the past and learn from them?
this is
Otherwise, the risk is you just end up sitting in a folder somewhere on a directory and never see the light of day again.
definitely. I think it's become very clear recently that lessons learned are very important and a major part of the project review. It's something that we are going to be ensuring happens from the beginning of a project and continues through the lifetime of it. And we're hoping, not hoping, we will be creating a bit of a library of lessons learned and ensuring that projects going forward refer to that for anything good and bad going forward. So that's something that we're very much working on within the project management framework at the moment.
Okay.
The other thing is these are collated at the end of the project. Well, this is I'm sort of project done. What you waterfall methodology. If you use more agile methodologies, you do a tranche and you learn the lessons from that tranche as you go through. So effectively, you're folding them back into the project all the time. So I just wonder whether there'd be opportunity within the methodology you have to do something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And we are sort of reviewing the framework at the moment. This was done after the project, but one of the lessons learned is that it definitely shouldn't have been done at the end of the project.
Yeah.
It should have been done upfront and throughout the lifetime. So that will be changing for future projects.
So I suppose it'd be fair to say next time that any project of this size or anything comes along, the first thing you look at is the recommendation for the future to make sure that we've covered those ones and work on the paper that way backwards rather than looking for that one. Would that be a fair thing? Because a lot of work's been put into this, and a lot of analysis and everything else, and we don't want to waste it. We need to use it because it will save time, and time saves money for the future. So I think that's a very important factor.
Definitely, yeah, that is our plan.
Okay, any other questions on that one? So we again are asked, recommended that GRAC review the recommendations identified within the lessons learned log, which is attached to Appendix A, and consider any necessary actions or further recommendations. I think we've given some verbal ones, which I think have been agreed. You okay with that, Emma? You don't need a vote. No. Thank you very much on that. Okay, we're now on to item number 12, the corporate risk register. Please.
Yeah, there isn't a paper for this because we've had some issues with getting the document extracted from the system, unfortunately, due to staff illness. The person that really knows how to do this hasn't been in. But I do have an update on the strategic risks that we have in the register. We have the financial risk, which is credit and counterparty, and covers things such as the budget. We've set a balanced budget for 23-24, and a capital programme has also been agreed for the coming year. There was pressure on the budget. I think all members are aware of the fact that we needed to find savings. We were also pleased to receive from central government a 3% funding guarantee grant of just under £1 million, which helped with our budget position. In terms of our investments and borrowings, we're seeing the effects of the Bank of England's increasing base rates, with additional income being received from our investments, so our returns are above what we'd anticipated. We always check, we have procedure in place for any investment that we make in terms of checking it against a counterparty credit rating list, make sure that anything that is placed anywhere is with a sound institution. And we have treasury management advisors who update us daily on that list, and it's actually a live portal that we can go into and just check on those before we make any investments. We're currently we only have some temporary borrowing, which we are due to replace in probably about a week and a half's time. And that is all the borrowing that we have at this moment in time, and it is for cash flow purposes. At this time of year, we typically, most authorities need to take some short-term borrowing for cash flow purposes because we've stopped receiving our council tax and business rates income for the last 2 months of the financial year. On an operational level, there's not much to report on this. We haven't had any major new risks identified. One of the risks that previously we'd got in, I think, has been mitigated somewhat in the loss of digital information data with our firewall protection. We've extended that contract. I think a report came to a committee to seek approval for that in terms of an exemption on the contract procedures. We gave that to the existing contractor as it was the best way of going forwards with that. So we have full cover with our firewall and security of data now by the same provider. We chose to do this because we'd had, again, some staff shortages within IT, which were for different reasons, unfortunately. But we are adequately covered there. Macroeconomics, the risk that we face as a result of what's happening nationally. There has been recently signs of a slowdown in the rate of inflation. I think the Bank of England's policy on increasing interest rates has started to have an effect. But this obviously places more pressure on mortgage holders, which in turn may see more people coming to us for help and support. And we're having to deal with that, a slight increase in the benefits team's work. And also the revenues team have been paying out on the alternative energy funding grants, and there are whispers, murmurings that these may be extended beyond the end of April, and which would again see some increase in the work in the revenues team. So in terms of risks, the macroeconomic position, I think, is slowly changing, but there do remain some pressures on both residents in terms of what they have available and the need to come to us for help and support. And that in effect has an impact on the work that we have to do. The other risks that we have in the strategic register are the strategic risks, which are around major projects, and these sort of link into so risk 4, which is the strategic, then 5, environmental and social, and then the corporate project related risks are sort of all interrelated. We've got some of our risks mitigated here. We've got nutrient neutrality. We're pleased that we've had agreement from members to set up the joint venture with Anglian Water and the other districts in the county that's taking part. So that is going to help us in terms of enabling us to move forward with housing developments and other developments throughout the area. That can be started again. We've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. That is a big programme, so that will be something that we need to look at and identify the risks in terms of keeping up with the planned spend and the programme, because it's time limited. We'll be getting certain grant funding by year, so that is a project to manage, and there may be some risks that we need to identify there. We've also recently been given some funding for the provision of government funding for the provision of local 7 additional properties to house refugees within the district. And the approach that we're taking on this, we have time limited to the end of December this year to spend that money. So we've, again, this has been brought before members quite recently. We're going to work with local housing association providers to provide those additional properties and passport the funding through to them. That will ensure that we can actually provide those 11 properties and reduce the risk there. We've also had the local plan recently approved by members again, and this will mean that we can submit it to the inspector for inspection, and then within that we'll hopefully meet a lot of the environmental and social areas of risk that we have identified. With that can all has been incorporated into the plan. And then finally, looking at our environmental risks, we've got the Reef Solar Carport that has recently been improved, and we'll be beginning work there shortly, hopefully to be finished before the start of the summer. That will help contribute quite significantly to reducing our carbon emissions and reaching our net zero target by 2030. So all in all, there is a lot of work going on and has recently come forward that will help mitigate these risks. And some areas of new work where we will actually need to make sure that we identify all the risks involved. So if there are any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Without a paper, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
I
it's very
know.
difficult to really make comment on it, isn't it?
Can I just sort of clarify the fact that you will be able to get a
Yes.
briefing of what you'd said, email to the members, and I think then if they have any comment, then they can get back to you. You need a copy of that as well, right? Yeah, I thought you would do, but I think that's fair. I thank you for giving us that briefing on that, and I think all we can really say is that we note a verbal communication was made and that the committee listened and asked for a report to be sent out via emails. Is everyone content with that? Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, item 13. I'm proposing, if everyone wants, we move item 13 to the end of the meeting because there are purple papers involved, and then we can go into a private session if anyone wants to discuss any of the content of it. Unless everyone suddenly thinks I don't really want to discuss any of it, then we don't have to, but I think we'll move. Okay, so we'll move that one to the end, and then we'll do the usual wordings on that one. Okay, thank you for that. Item 14 is the procurement exempt certificate. That's Cara.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. At each GRAC meeting, I inform members of the exemptions that were granted from the preceding period. So the time before this, there were 2 exemptions, and the following period, the 23rd of November 22 to the 8th of February 23, there were 2 exemptions. Unless you've got any questions, one of those exemptions was the matter that the section 151 officer referred to, being the network surety exemption. Following the sad loss of a member of the IT department, we needed to get some urgent firewall provision in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments on the exemption? No, thank you. Okay, the exemption certificate, we are asked to review and note the procurement exemption register. Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Item number 15 on the agenda is the GRAC action list. Emma, are you able to do that for us?
Yes, I think most of the actions have been completed, and just to confirm that the business continuity policy was approved by Cabinet subsequent to the recommendation from this committee. And I think just over on the other page, the only other action was around the in-year budget overspend to be added to the corporate risk register, which I'm assuming we will see in the next written update, but otherwise everything else has been completed.
Any comments on the action list? No. Okay, we can accept that one. Thank you very much. Item number 16, the committee work.
Yep.
Anything there, Emma?
So the work programme for June, as commented on earlier, the draft statement of accounts for 21-22 will come through to June. As will the counter fraud, corruption and bribery policy, that's been on the work programme for a while to come through to that meeting. Again, we've only gone up really to March because of going into a new year here, but you have your standard reports like the annual governance statement, the annual report and opinion. And I think, Faye, you're bringing your usual reports through to the next meeting. So the follow-up reports and internal audit recommendations and the progress reports will both come through to June as well. So you've got quite a heavy agenda for the next committee.
Whoever they be. Okay, thank you for that. Very good. Okay, that is the end of standard business for the GRAC committee. We're going to go back to item 13. But first of all, we will need to, as agreed, to pass a resolution that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 5 of part 1 of schedule 12A as amended to the Act. That the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosure for the following reasons. Information related to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information, the appended report contains commercially confidential information. Can I have a proposer, please? Pierre, seconder, Christopher, show of hands, please.